Hello and welcome to
Wisdom for Menopause and Beyond. It is.
talking about midlife, female wisdom,
Yeah.
shared wisdom, and all the things that we've learned in life ourselves, people we've met,
Things that are
and so
useful.
sharing them. And it
Yeah.
was something I was reading last night on that thing I really hate, which is Facebook, but I really hate it.
Okay.
But I've got this little group called Van Lifers, which is just about people that go off on their van. I've got a little van and they go off for weekends. Some people live on their vans, but it's just one of those lovely little magazine-y things that you can see. But someone was talking on there about there's an awful lot of people around this sort of 50s that may be breaking up in their relationship and then going on vans, going to live in a van
Because they can't afford a house.
because they can afford a house. So they're going to live in a van. And it was somebody just saying, why, when I've made the right decision and it's been 29 years and I've made the right decision and I've tried really hard and I'm living, and why is it so difficult? Why is this so difficult? Why am I in this new place that should feel like I've got out of this relationship that's been long and difficult? It's crumbled away. I've really tried. Why does it kind of feel worse now?
Were you saying that they were saying something to do with, I keep remembering the good times, or I'm mourning the good times, and people are saying, well, that's because you remember the good times, and not the bad things that made you leave.
And although they could remember the bad things that made them laugh, there's a sort of a propensity, there's a very strange selectiveness about the brain and how it selects things out. And so sometimes you can look back on a relationship you're in or a job you're in or whatever it is, and you can only see the bad. And you can pick out the bad and you recognize the bad. And it almost seems like when you've gone on to your next relationship or your next job or whatever that happens to be, you look at now and see the bad and only remember the good. And there's an awful lot of difficulties around change. The way we look at that, and we almost look at the reality, or we look at the memories as if they're reality. This is actually what happened. There's a
definitely selective, things like
a selectiveness that you look on the past and remember the good times.
And I suppose, is it related to good old Kubler-Ross and her change curve? Because she was looking at kind of like bereavement. So when it's kind of something that was like major catastrophic thing, that you go through these different, stages, you go through kind of denial, and then you're kind of angry, and then I know there are 4 stages, but I know, and you finally kind of get to acceptance maybe, and then kind of moving forward. So there's this whole kind of thing, like you're really resistant. It hasn't happened. So if you're kind of thinking, let's kind of saying, if you're going through that relationship, whatever it was, and then you kind of come into that, you finally realize that it is actually not good and it's not great for you, and you should leave it. And then you go through almost like those stages again. You're going into denial. It's still a bit, my life isn't perfect suddenly, because I've left this bad relationship. So maybe I'm denial. I'm denying. Do I get into denying that I've made the right decision? Do we kind of initially resist that?
I think it's interesting, isn't it? I suppose it very much depends on what you're leaving and where you're going to, and your individual, like a lot of things, your individual approach to change. We've spoken about that before with menopause. That are you somebody who loves the change or somebody who resists it?
Exactly.
And I think that is part of it. But I do think we can look back and think it's a general thing that we look back and miss. And we look back and look at all of the good times, all of those happy moments, those nights when it didn't hurt. And I wonder if that's how we are with menopause as well, a little bit, that you look back and think, oh, my life was lovely before I had all this difficulty right here.
Lovely. I used to have lovely skin. And I kind of think there are a number of things going on. Is it different if you leave or if you are the one that is left? Because in that sense, and I just kind of, having had that, the other experience, having been left in a relationship, and actually that whole thing about remembering the good times, all the rest of it, and remembering right, at the beginning of that whole process, absolutely in denial, absolutely couldn't quite believe it was going on, never thought that it would happen, thought it was all fine, thought it was perfect, thought, whatever we'd gone through, we'd worked it through, and there was, we were looking forward to the next stage. Turned that wasn't a mutual impression. But it was like, so I was, yes, looking, and I just remember could be in floods of tears at those thoughts of, well, this is never going to happen to me before, and it was just so lovely and so wonderful. So I was definitely remembering all the positive things, and I wasn't remembering the arguments, the things when it didn't get on, the times when I felt belittled, the realization that I'd kind of been undermined for quite some time, and all of those things. Because at the beginning, it was almost like I had to cling on to it at any cost.
I think it's such a massive grief process.
Yeah.
So change has always got grief because there's always a loss. And when we grieve, I guess it makes sense that we grieve good things. Yes. We don't grieve the bad.
Yes, I'm really sorry that those arguments aren't happening anymore. That's not going to happen. It's not going to
happen. So I guess there's always that massive change of grief, because even if you're the one that thought, I'm definitely going to be left by Christmas, I don't know why, Christmas is always a bloody bookmark, isn't it? Right. I'll be left by Christmas and do this by Christmas.
No, I got left on, he left on Mother's Day. Perfect. That was lovely.
A different bookmark.
Yeah, different bookmark. There we go.
But it's definitely, even if you've done that, there's a time when you were doing this, however hard-hearted, and they're now doing that, and even then it's sort of that sadness of change, that you can remember, living in a house, it was freezing cold, you couldn't afford the bills, and you're now living in a van, you're having a lovely time, and but you still miss, there's a sort of a golden looking back.
Yeah, maybe that's it. There's a bit like it's always greener on the other side. There's always seeing that somebody's always having a better life than you. Where was I having a better life beforehand? But actually, why can't we just be in that moment? But
be in the moment of but acceptance is difficult. And I think the more you look into the study of memory, or the study of wherever they are, which I always find particularly interesting, is there's something called eyewitness testimony, which is very, very well,
and isn't it completely unreliable?
It's completely, in fact, someone will correct me, but I think about the 1970s it was considered inadmissible evidence because it was so bad, because people were done for it, but they did wonderful studies, which I like these. And they do something like everyone turns up for a job interview, and there's a random thing that happens. And this random act is somebody runs across and steals a handbag and then runs away. And everyone said, I'm really sorry about the job interview, you're going to have to put it to one side, but can you write down what you saw? Can you write down what happened? So these people are writing down exactly what they saw. And you get everything from a 5-foot blonde white male to a 6'6" black.
All right.
Somebody aged between 20 and 30, aged between 70 and 80. You have these huge things, and people will stake their life on it. This is absolutely what they saw.
Absolutely what happened.
And when they're told it was an experiment, and we're going to show you a video of exactly what happened, a lot of people turn around and say,
that wasn't what happened.
Well, that wasn't what happened. You changed the video.
So
what is interesting is we get into the philosophy, which will probably be our next one. Does truth exist?
Oh, please no.
But the idea is, of course, there's an element of truth that always exists, which is our current experience. So when we have this, I feel, it's not invalid that you feel, and it's nice to feel, but you might actually introduce the idea of, I'm very happy to be very sad and miserable and looking back, but I do know that that's not the full truth, if you see what I mean. So,
which is a pretty advanced state to be in, I think. And I think particularly if you're in a situation where you've been in this situation, you talked about somebody who's been in a relationship for 29 years, it's like you've been in that situation for a long time, nearly 3 decades. So how on earth do you expect to feel fine on day one?
So what I would say to somebody is, no, you're not going to feel fine.
No.
But it's a bit like you shake up a bottle of with glitter or sand in it.
Yeah.
And you put it down and you let it settle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just that knowledge of this is not everything. Just if you're feeling that, it's kind of, I guess we come back to the menopause, it's the big change we talk about in women's life.
Yeah.
But it's just like, today I'm experiencing, and it's not that I'm wrong. No. And it's not that this is not happening.
Yeah.
But there may be other parts to this video, other parts to this
thing. And it doesn't invalidate my choices.
It doesn't invalidate my choices. But I think I've made the right choice.
Yeah.
Today I'm feeling very sad about that. That's very valid and it's very normal. And I like to say to people, you're not mad.
I know.
It's been 29 years. This is ingrained in your memory. This is ingrained in your brain. This is ingrained in everything.
Yeah.
Every cell of your body has a memory. It's there. Yeah. But you're beginning to just let that settle. And if you can, allow the new to grow. So you're not forcing.
So
many people say what you said is like, you're out of that bad relationship now. Brilliant. Let's go down the pub.
Yeah.
Let's have a party. It's divorce night.
I know. So the situation I was in, so it had been a 10-year relationship. And I do remember that kind of first morning waking up, and it was a completely different situation than it had been for the past 10 years. And it was almost like I could only cope. It was almost at the beginning, it was like hour to hour.
Yes.
Maybe even that. And then I got to a point where I could think about the day, and then it might be a week. So I could only think about those limited
go back to a day. That's the thing when people go, I now managed to do a whole week and I didn't. And then all of a sudden I've obviously broken because I'm back to a day.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, and you have to think, oh, today was not a good day.
Yes. And I remember this guy who was a friend of my ex that time, there was some point we'd it was almost like I made a joke about I don't know whether it was doing something with him or doing something like that, and he was like saying, so you being don't make a joke about it, don't be serious, because I haven't been in a relationship for a while. I'm thinking, oh, hold on a minute. So I've just been left by my husband 10 years, and I've just been about last week, and you're thinking, oh, I could go do something else now. It is like that thing. Shouldn't you be over it by now?
Oh, yeah.
I had somebody say that to me about a month out. Shouldn't you be over that by now? Why are you still feeling sad? Another guy, actually, as it turned out. And I'm just kind of like, are you really? For real? And it was almost like...
It's very nice anyway. Did you know he called you a cow behind your back? And you think, that still hurts.
I know, that's right, yes. And it was almost like somebody described it as there's an expectation of you had all your emotions in your emotional bank account.
Yeah.
And what you should do is, you've made, so obviously he had made a withdrawal. He'd just taken all his emotions out there and then he put it into a different bank, as it turned out, different relationship. And it was like, for me, I was expected to do the same thing. So there's no point in having your emotions in that emotional bank account anymore because it doesn't exist. So take them out and put them somewhere else and just get on with your life and it'll all be fine.
And I guess some people are like that, but
maybe.
But I do think it's this element of, if you feel it's right, and you make that change, and it does feel like, WTF have I just done?
Yes.
I think you just allow it to settle, because our initial reaction is always, it's our initial reaction is always to go back where it was safe. Because however bad it was unknown. And that is it's very,
known.
It's very learned, that's how we survived with the dinosaurs or wherever we were.
Let's go back to a known situation.
It's a known situation. So you go into this new one and you kind of think, this is not all truth. It wasn't all good. If it makes me feel good today to remember those things, I'll do that. If it doesn't, I won't. And just allow it to settle and know that the truth will open if you let it.
Yeah. And I kind of think that, going back to the situation for me, it took a year for the snow globe flakes to settle. And then I could start to realise, actually,
there's bad there
too. Thank God he took that action, because actually I'm now in a much better situation than I was then. And I was more myself. I was more independent. I was stronger. I had much more resilience. I felt much better about my life, all that case, to the extent that, another year later, I was actually able to go back and say, don't agree with how you did it, but I'm grateful that you did. So,
although it was on Facebook, so unfortunately, but it was going through the comments and people were going, it's been 3 years and I think I'm beginning to trust. It's been 5 years and I'm still feeling. It's been 6 months and it was really hard. I decided I just didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to think good, bad, or indifferent. So I think, again, it's like, after your first Christmas, if somebody very dear to you dies, your first Christmas is going to be hard, and then it's going to be fine. And you think,
and then his birthday's going to come around,
and then it'll be fine. And actually, the second Christmas is worse, because the first Christmas everybody goes, it's the second Christmas they go, you're fine.
Exactly.
So it's but the most important thing is, as you were saying, is allow it to settle, be true to your feelings, but don't get connected with your feelings. The relationship with your feelings is like, I recognize that, but I'm not going to get involved in the grief. I'm going to let it settle and just let that but any change is like that. But if you feel you're in the wrong place in a relationship and you thought it through, and after 29 years you more or less
probably have thought a lot about it,
I would say you've got one life. I would say live it.
And be the person.
Be fair. Don't be fearful of making that wrong decision.
And it is about finding out who you are on your own, without the mask of that relationship, whatever it was that was going on for you. And it will.
And the other piece of advice is buy a van.
Apparently. I mean, that's the thing.